Hello everyone. Uh, Welcome to my channel. Today we are gonna start a journey. We're gonna understand like what are the basic blocks that are required to understand geopolitics, because geopolitics is something that we all get affected on a daily basis. And politics is not a dirty word. We see politics across all our dimensions of life. So there is politics, it is at a national level, it is at a office level, it is even at a family level. So it is not something that we want to idly run away from. We would like to understand like how it shapes our daily lives, and even you can see politics in mythology also. So if you are familiar with the Hindu mythology, you will see politics happening in the epic Mahabharat, which is essentially all about geopolitics, tactics, and it essentially affected the entire spirit of the civilization that we are living in today. So, to continue with this, I'm going to base my initial framework on the works of Alexander. I think this might be not the correct spelling. Alexander Dugin. Let's try a Dugin here. He wrote a book called Foundations of Geopolitics. It's a good book. I am also learning it as to what is happening in current world. I wanted to like keep myself updated and to understand okay what is going on. Every now and then new war comes up and we get off guard, caught off guard. So what is happening? So essentially this book has a very important concept. I think we can use it to base our entire journey and can build a framework upon it. And that idea is that country, or in book it is referred to as a state, it is an organism. So let's try to understand what this idea is actually uh, trying to say. So we all know countries have a boundary. It has people, it has land, people, it has culture, it has people have demographics. So essentially it, based on the boundary thing, we try to understand okay, country would be like a defined boundary. This is a particular land, we live here, and this is, let's say, country X. But if we try to understand it from an this particular analogy that country is an organism, then what can it tell us? It can tell us like several things. First of all, organism is born, it grows, it survives, and it might thrive also. In some nations they thrive and they turn into empires. And if the fate is not good, then they can die also. And the important part of this concept is that it tells you that a country or a state, country or state, its boundaries are not going to be static, dynamic boundaries. Now what does that help us understand? So dynamic boundaries is like a direct conclusion as to, if we assume that a state is an organism, this explains us a very important thing that is happening in our current world, which is wars. Why people are fighting? Essentially, if you understand it as an organism, you would see that organism in currently USA plus Israel is fighting another organism called Iran or Iran or Persia. And this organism will try to expand its boundaries, and as an organism which Iran is, it will try to protect its boundaries. So essentially it turns out that it is a geopolitics becomes a clash between organisms. And what happens when organisms fight? They might die, they might get injured, they might can figure out a way to have some peace. So organism is essentially a living entity whose boundaries are dynamic. That's why we can say that boundaries need not to be static, and each organism would try to expand its boundaries. So what's next? Like, we came with this conclusion that okay, if state or country is an organism, then it will try to expand its boundaries. It will try to develop its culture so that it can grow and grow. So in this particular book, I think there are like 7 laws of expansions that it was explained. I think it would be good to have a look at it. I think the first rules of expansion of this organism is that state would try to increase its scope of culture. So as we are reading and we're going through this concept, we will try to verify that okay, is that a true statement? Can we verify it empirically? So as we know, currently we live in an US based world where our culture is mostly dictated by Hollywood. So in several countries, we all know like which are the top movies. They have this Oscars, they have Netflix. These are all tools of expansion of culture. That is the first rule, that each state would try to expand its culture because culture is one of the characteristics of the organism. And the more it expands the culture, the more the extent of the state would increase. And there are other ways a state can do expansion. One of the ways is ideology. So we all know that, or not all, some of us know that there was a Cold War where it was clash of two ideologies. Then there is also an expansion of commercial activity, which is essentially trade. So China did this pretty well. They expanded the scope of their commercial activity, is now the hub of manufacturing for this world. So we see these characteristics playing out throughout the course of history. Ideology is one, commercial activity is one, and the other one would be, it will try to expand scope of production. This is also kind of like a subset. In also commercial activity, you would also see USA, which is also a financial hub. The third rule of expansion is, oops, I don't want this color. Yeah. So third rule of expansion is that a state when expands, it tries to absorb other less important entities. This is, I think, if you have been following news, you would know that the case of USA and Venezuela. USA expanding. We also see this concept playing out in UK during the time of British Empire. It spread all around. It absorbed India. They because through the East India Company, there was also other empires like Dutch, Spanish, and currently we have an US empire, which is trying to expand, and it is trying to absorb other entities. In this, they absorb India, some parts of China also, and so on. Fourth rule of expansion is about the border. So what? How can we fit border in our current analogy? So let's say you have this area. This is a nation, and it has like a border like these. Now the border is different from the mainland in a sense that border experiences pressures from other states. Other states. Oops. Oh my god. Yeah. Other states. So there are other states also which will try to exert pressure on this. That's why when you have borders, they can be treated as a separate organ which has a function. The function is to protect the rest of the state. And that's why you would see the culture, conditions, it will be totally different as to what is in border versus what is in the mainland. So border can be treated as an organ itself, and that is like a very good concept that we'll try to explore as to like how borders change across time, because the expansion would lead some borders to become mainland and it would create the new borders. The next principle of this expansion is that by process of expansion, what state is trying to do is it is trying to create important regions of development. So how do we check this? So let's take the example of US Iran. By the process of expansion, what US is trying to do is trying to gain controls of the region which is currently is Strait of Hormuz. Also trying to gain, you can debate, I'm not sure if this is the right objective, is to gain control of oil. So it is a region for development. Oops, development E is missing. Okay, yeah, I'll leave it. All right. The next thing that we discussed when we were discussing right now about the borders was that the expansion urge to expand, it comes from generally a lesser civilization. So we can make the argument that China, which US thinks it is a lesser civilization, might be a threat that has led to trade war, and US wants to expand. Same goes during Cold War, threat from USSR, or vice versa. USSR can also think US as a threat and wanting to expand. So I'll always have to see from the perspective of the organism. On one perspective, you might be looking at USSR, another case you might be looking at US, in another case you might be looking at China. So everybody is expanding, thinking that okay, the other player is also going to expand, so I'll have to like keep up with that. And the last rule or last law of expansion is that a tendency to absorb weaker nations. It is, the more it grows, the more you would want to do it. Grows. So you can take the argument here that British Empire. Britain was just this kind of a land near Europe. So this was UK and this was Europe. What they did was they sent people outside to expand, and they conquered North America. They came to India, China, Australia. So it's not like they had resources which was limited. They always wanted to get new resources. So here it was land, obviously. Here it was spices. In Middle East you would see oil. In Africa you would see minerals. In China they used opium to gain leverage here. In North America, again, resources. In South America, it was silver. So a lot of them. So idea is that they might have been very self-sufficient at that point of time, but since they were in the mode of conquering, they keep on going, growing, and it expand across a whole globe at a particular time. Same as with the US, but it's different. And same with it will be with respect to other state which will come in the future. So to recap, what we have discussed in this video is that politics is essential because it is at a nation level. We are part of it whether we like it or not. We see it at an office level. It's in our family. And in Indian mythology, the Mahabharata is essentially a geopolitics scenario turned into an epic that still teaches us a lot of lessons. The second concept that I explained from the book from Alexander Dugin was the treating country or state as an organism, and the characteristics of an organism, it is as a boundary. Country as a people, demographics, it's the constitution constituents of the organism. It has culture. It is also one of the components of the organism. And as an organism, country can is born, grows, survives, thrives, can become an empire and it might die also. There are several countries that has died. And given this analogy, we can treat that boundaries are not static, they are dynamic. It has changed across time, and this is explains the wars that we are facing in current world. US and Israel fighting Iran, Iran is retaliating, but each organism is trying to prevent itself from dying. Somebody is trying to like push others, somebody is trying to survive. So it's all the fight between organisms, and in these fights some die, some injured, and some might make peace also. And the next part that we looked into was the rules of expansion. A state would always try to expand because it would fear that other state is also going to expand, so it has no choice but to expand. And it can expand using its culture, ideology, the capital, commercial activity, getting leverage in production, and it will try to absorb lesser entities, the weaker entities. And again, we always have to treat borders as dynamic, and they are different. The situation there is different. It always feels pressure from the outside. That's why the culture conditions of the people in the borderlands would be different. And by the process of expansion, each country is trying to gain and reserve, get resources for itself. And this urge, they feel it's coming from the outside, because if let's say I am US and the other player is Iran or maybe China, I might think that they might expand, so I should expand. And as China, I might also want to say see that possibility. So it essentially leads that both players are trying to expand, and we are in players in an expansion game. And the last is the weak, the getting to conquesting the weaker nations. It doesn't stop anywhere. It has never stopped. British Empire spanned across the globe. It reduced, countries gained independence, and US scope. And there might be new empires. There certainly will be new empires in the future. And we'll always have to take these principles into account, because these principles explain us what is happening in this world. And if we are able to understand what is happening and what should happen, they are two different things. The cognitive dissonance in our minds would get dropped a little bit, and you might understand, okay, why it is happening, it, how to consume your news, how to position your career, how to protect your wealth. Because we have been taught that war is not good, these things are not good for anybody, but that doesn't help us in understanding why this is happening. So the idea is what should happen and what is happening are two different things, and what will happen is also a different thing. And if we are able to understand, we can reduce the cognitive dissonance in our minds, and it will lead us to reduce anxiety, and we might be able to protect our friends and family and ourselves also, and live a happy and peaceful life for ourselves and for others as well. So that's all for today. Hope you liked it, and we'll continue with this series. The next theory that I'm going to pick up is the Heartland theory. I think this is going to explain us the world wars that we have had, World War One and Two, Russia-Ukraine war, and why the US Iran Israel war is happening, and what would be the possible other wars that can happen in future. It's all part of a giant scheme. If you're able to see it, I think it's going to be beneficial for everybody, and you can explain, okay, to yourself at least, okay, why this is happening and what should I do about it. So, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Have a good day and see you later. Bye.